Good morning. We have people joining in. It's fun to watch the participant count just click up and up and up. I'd like to welcome everyone as people are joining. Welcome everyone to our sixth Insights and Analytics Forum webinar, which I think is a great achievement in our inaugural year, both in terms of number and quality and content. The attendance we've had at these webinars have been exceptional and really reinforced the value of P&G alumni and what we attach to learning and sharing with one another. And it also reinforces the benefit of extending the P&G Alumni Network programming into functional specific areas. So it's a double win for all of us. Last night, I had the privilege and opportunity to attend a P&G Alumni Foundation event honoring Francie Pepper. If you're unfamiliar with the foundation, it does fantastic work supporting nonprofits led by P&G alumni leaders who are making real impact on lives across the globe. They give grants to nonprofits that facilitate empowerment to improve lives. So, for example, last night's honoree was based in Mumbai and helps women transfer from trafficking and saves them by training them and helping them move into textile jobs. So Google can help you find more information out about the foundation. With that shout out aside, I'd like to begin our program on the shifting roles of insights and analytics. Let me share my screen. Um, I think I'm going to take for granted that you can all see the screen. So shifting roles is really a vast understatement. We could have called the shift a tsunami, an explosion, or something more dramatic or creative, but definitely there's just a lot of change going on in the industry, and that changes both tools and job definitions and skill sets and the like. So I'm going to share a quick info bit on the forum before introducing Mitch. Jeff Adler will lead a fireside chat with Mitch, and then we'll do audience Q&A with Sarah. And at the end, for the people who have time, we'll jump into a separate Zoom link um, so that we can just do a group chat and networking and talk about each other's lives, the content, or whatever. Just so you know a little bit more about the forum, here are the group of people who've committed time and effort and energy and wisdom to pulling these events off. Jeff and Sarah are co-chairs for this event. Marina's handled the emails, and Paula and Kristen and Jessica and Smriti have all contributed to different events. So if you could make sure you find the chat. I'm going to find mine while I'm saying that. Um, so you should be able to chat with everyone, and that is not set up. So this is my own note. You should be able to chat with everyone now. Um, Thank you, Sarah and Jeff, for your notes. Go ahead and say hello, where you're joining from, and even paste in your LinkedIn profile. A lot of times people like to connect with each other through the chat. And then there's also a Q&A button. It may be somewhere else on the bottom, a little bit different from what this screen shows. But that's where questions go for the audience participation of Q&A. If you paste them in the chat, somebody's going to tell you, hey, remember to put it in the Q&A. Happens every session, but I always like to remind people it's just much easier to manage and digest there. On the website, the pgalums.com, you can find more information about the forum, including our purpose and our vision. We're really focused on helping alumni with connections, with capabilities and enrichment, career and community. Also on the website, there are 5 previous webinars at pgalums.com. So if you see this red arrow at the top pointing to resources, you click on resources, then forums, then insights and analytics. And the last couple of sessions focused on transformation to AI with Christy and Lauren, and Yogesh talking about advanced topics in AI, synthetic data, and more. Fascinating webinars. Before that, we had Kurti Singh, who needs no introduction, and also great events with Kendra Speed, and then Kim Dawn and Autumn and Jessica. So all of that content is on the website. You just scroll down to the bottom where the video is posted. And then the last announcement is the newsletters. So we send announcements in the global network emails, but oftentimes they're buried within a bunch of emails. And so it's really important to be able to communicate with you directly so you don't miss our announcements. They don't happen very often. There's, a couple of them, two, three of them for each event. So all you do is you click on your profile in the top right, go to My Newsletters, start typing Insights, and it'll pop up and you can select Insights and Analytics. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mitch. You may know him from Procter, which would be wonderful. You may have heard of the company he ran for many years called Nielsen. Interesting that it's got both market measurement and media measurement, as well as survey data through Bases and likewise. But he also has a wealth of research firm experience, and so he's going to be sharing some information about some of these different firms that he has been on the board on and what he's learned from them. A small, quick anecdote I have with working with Mitch back in 1990. I'm dating myself, but I was a young brand pup. We had a great ARS score, and we went to ask Mitch who had developed the ARS model, and how we generated top 20% in TPM, trial potential measure, convincingness, and distinctiveness. And the distinctiveness was actually if you got a 0 or 1% on same old thing, open-ended coded comments, you were top 20. If you got 2%, you were top 40. And if you got 3%, you were middle quintile. And I said, well, Mitch, I'm a marketer, not a researcher, but it seems like the margin of error is bigger than that. And he said, I know, Jeff, but the fact of the matter is that's what the analytics show. You get better results with each point decrease in same old thing comments. So it's a good context to think about this move from an integration of survey research and analytics. So with that, I will hand it off to Mitch and Jeff to start the dialogue.
Mitch, thanks for joining us. Good to see you again.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So I want to start off and ask you, you've spent almost your entire career in this industry. How'd you land here in the first place, and what led you to stay?
Well, when I was coming out of university, my favorite two job offers, one was with P&G in market research, and the other was with a boutique commercial bank. And I didn't know which one to choose, so I asked my dad. I said, Dad, what do you think I ought to do? And he said, do you know what you want to do long term in your life, not just in the first job that you have? And I said, no, I really don't. And he said, yeah, exactly. So go with the brand name. That's Procter and Gamble, because, wherever you end up down the road, that'll be pretty useful to you. So I did, and he was right. And it was good advice. Now, why I stayed in market research my whole career, turned out I liked it. There was an eclectic mix of people. I liked the process, the research process. I liked the fact that you could build some domain expertise over time. It was challenging, and I liked that too. And just kind of went on from there. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed my career in market research. Sometimes people say you should find what you're passionate about and then go do that. And for me, it was kind of the opposite. I found something that I was reasonably good at, and over time, I became passionate about it, and then I just stayed.
If you could do it all over again, would you?
Yeah, I would. In fact, your question reminds me of an article I read a few years ago. It was with Chrissie Hynde, who's the lead singer of the rock band The Pretenders. Hopefully somebody's heard of The Pretenders out there. And the author of that article asked her a really similar question. It was slightly different, though. The author said, if you could do it all over again, would you do anything differently? And her answer was, I would do everything differently. The things that went well could have gone a little better. The things that didn't go so well, of course, I would do those things differently. But if I take a step back from it all, if I could do it all over again, I would still choose to be the lead singer of the Pretenders. And I have exactly the same answer. I would too. I would be the lead singer of the Pretenders. No, I would choose to have the same career path that I ended up choosing when I was a youngster out of university. I've loved it and have been very grateful for all the different experiences that I've had. You could say I've been a pretender in the market research world for my career.
I remember the Pretenders. I'm concerned that dates us.
Yes, probably. Yeah, a bunch of people right now are going outside the window saying, "Who are the Pretenders?" You know.
Right. um, who was the best manager you had in your career?
It was at P&G. Her name was Nancy Zigarelli. It was when I was in market research. She was very, very smart, intimidatingly smart, and also very tough. And she was just the perfect boss for me. And I have a funny story about her. This was back in the day when everything happened at P&G by writing memos. Maybe it still does, I'm not sure. But back then, it definitely was. You had to write memos, you sent them to your boss, you got some feedback, you tried to finalize it, and then work moved on from there. So one day she called me on the telephone, said, "Hey, come by my office." So I walk over, I stop at the door of her office, and I said, "Hi, Nancy, you asked me to stop by." And she is in her office working at her computer, and her back is to me. So she didn't even turn around. And she said, "Yeah, thanks for stopping by. See that memo on my desk? Somebody wrote that shit and signed your name to it. And you better find out who did it before they ruin your career." That was what she said. It was funny. It was funny. But when I looked at it, she was exactly right. It wasn't my best work. And so it was a message well sent and well received. And inside of her comment was, "That's not you. That work was not up to your normal standard." And that's what I really appreciated about her was she consistently held me to a very high standard, and it served me well all throughout my career.
Interesting. Here's something you may not have known. To the best of my recollection, I think I was Nancy's first direct report after she got promoted to supervisor.
Ah, yeah.
Um, so she practiced on me before she got you right. So during your 20 plus years at Nielsen, you work with many different clients around the world. You probably came across a lot of P&G alums. Do you have a good P&G alum story to share?
I did come across a lot of P&G alums. It was always a joy. My favorite story along those lines, it was when I was based in China, and it was around 2010. I think that was the year. And I was in the city of Tianjin, which is about an hour's train ride outside of Beijing. And I was meeting with a company there called Tingxin, which is a beverage company. And the client that I was meeting with that day, the person, his name was Peter Pan. And it was one of those meetings that unfortunately, you grow a little accustomed to when you're a Nielsen person, which is the client is telling you all the bad things that Nielsen does and how you just don't live up to their expectations. So it was not a very pleasant meeting, and he was yelling a little bit, more than a little bit, perhaps. But there was a moment in the meeting where he said something using a phrasing that it just caught my attention. So I said, "Hey, can we just pause for a second? By chance, did you used to work at Procter and Gamble?" Because what I had heard him say sounded like a Procter phrasing, you know. And he said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I worked there for several years." And everything up to that point in the meeting, it was a really ugly meeting. But from that moment on, it was a completely different meeting. We suddenly were friends. There was a mutual amount of respect. And we actually became real friends after that and stayed in touch with one another for several years. And it was just one of those examples of the global power and reach of the P&G alumni community. And I'll never forget that one.
I love that. I really enjoyed being a part of the alumni network and the Insights Forum. There really is just sort of a shared connection in this
Yeah,
community. So,
for sure.
uh, on a personal level, you and your wife, I understand you have three grown children. Did any of them end up in insights and analytics or market research?
As a matter of fact, all three of them did. Two of them still work at market research companies. Our third, our middle child, our daughter, Emily, was at market research businesses for a little while, and then she left and she is doing some things that are more entrepreneurial right now, but who knows, she may find her way back at some point. I hope so. But yeah, I've always been sort of fascinated by the fact that they all ended up at market research firms at one time or another. It's definitely not something I push them to do just because it's not my parenting style to be that directive with them. But they chose it for themselves. And what I would like to think is as they were growing up, they saw their dad really enjoyed the work that he did and enjoyed the people that he worked with. And they enjoyed those people too, because they got to meet a lot of the people I worked with over the years. And so all those things probably just combined for them to come to the point of view that, hey, maybe this is a good area for me too. And yeah, it's really been fun to see all of them land at different market research businesses.
Fun. Okay, I'm going to turn the um, turn the Zoom over to you for your presentation, and I'll come back in a little while and we'll do some Q&A.
That sounds good. Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to now share my screen. And I have, well, I'll tell you what I have here. Our subject for the day is, of course, insights and analytics and the shifting roles that we see in the marketplace for these different segments of our overall industry. And this is the roadmap for what I'm going to do here for the next several minutes. First, I'm going to just start with some definitions for clarity, because I think that's important so that we're all thinking of roughly the same thing as we're going through this discussion. Then the second thing I'll do is talk about some of the market trends, what's happening out there in the marketplace, and I'll have a little commentary around that. And don't worry, those first two sections, it's only 5 slides. I'm not gonna back up a truck and dump a bunch of slides on you. And then I'll finish up this section of our webinar today with a handful of examples of some firms that I think are doing some interesting things. So that's what we have here. Okay. So definitions, insights and analytics. For the discussion today, when I say insights, I'm mostly going to be referring to and thinking about survey research. I know that that is not all encompassing, but that's mostly what I'm focused on today when I say insights. And when I say analytics, I'm mostly going to be referring to analytics of behavioral data that are applied to what we've traditionally thought of as market research use cases. And that could be behavioral data that was originally collected for research purposes. Some of it is. But a lot of behavioral data was not originally collected for market research purposes. Instead, it was later repurposed. It was collected originally for some other reason and then repurposed and applied to a market research use case. That's what I'll be talking about when I talk about analytics today. So what that means is we might refer to these things different ways, insights or human insights or survey research. And on the analytics side, we might say analytics or behavioral data analytics or behavioral data for research. So my view, these are all different ways to say essentially the same thing. And really the goal here is just clarity. That's all. None of these are right or wrong, at least not in my view. Okay, so now let's look at the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace. And this is the insights and analytics marketplace. This is at the top of the page, the growth rates for revenue in calendar years 23 and 24. And these data draw from the Insights Association, which is an industry trade group, of course. It draws from their annual State of the U.S. Insights and Analytics report, right? That's what it's called. And they said that in 2024, the U.S. market for insights and analytics was about $83 billion in spending. And that market has grown 7.6% in each of those 2 years, 2023 and 2024. That's for the market overall as they defined it. They also then broke down the growth rates for various segments within that overall market. And for analytics, they said that grew almost 13% in each of those 2 years. It was 12.7 one year, 12.9 the other year, rounded up, call it 13% each year. Insights, on the other hand, grew more slowly. They didn't actually specify a segment, a nice tight segment definition for insights, but I could kind of back my way into it. It looks like that grew about 3 to 4% in each of those 2 years. So analytics growing a lot faster than insights. And as a result of that, you then see what's happening from a market share perspective. This compares market shares of those segments or of 2 segments in 2024 versus going back 5 years to 2019. Analytics had a 36% share of the insights and analytics market in 2024, and that's up 10 points from 26% in 2019. Established market research, here it was harder to get to a market share for insights specifically, but insights is mostly contained within the established market research segment. That saw its market share decline from 36% in 2019 down to 27% in 2024. That's sort of the macro shift that we're seeing inside of the overall marketplace in which we operate. Those are US data. Outside the US, there's a number of different sources, some from SOMAR, some from other sources. Their definitions, their segment definitions, their time periods, they all vary a little bit, but as best as I could tell, reading through them all, the overall growth rates of the markets and the shifts within the segments are largely similar to what we see for the US market. The growth rate in Asia Pac is probably a little higher than in the US. The growth rates in Europe probably a little bit lower over the past couple of years. So that's sort of the overall view of the market in terms of growth and shifts. Now let's go back to definition for 1 second. This is about behavioral data analytics. And what I want to just clarify here is behavioral data analytics cover a huge range of use cases. And some of those are use cases that we probably have traditionally thought of as market research use cases, but quite a few of them aren't. And so it's a little bit of a question of what do you include in the insights and analytics market for this discussion and for this audience versus what should be considered outside of that. And I'm not trying to define right and wrong here. I'm just trying to highlight the fact that there are a lot of different use cases, and not all of them are what we think of as solving for market research types of use cases. For instance, over in the no side of the box you see in the middle of the screen, cyber risk analytics, those are really important analytics for the business world. But I think we could probably all agree, or at least the vast majority of us would agree, that those are not within the scope of what we're talking about here today. On the left side in the yes column, informing activation, in other words, analytics that help guide targeted marketing. That's a pretty classic use case from a market research perspective. So I think that's a pretty easy yes. But what about the actual execution of activation? Would that be in the market that we're talking about today or not? And I think we could probably have some good arguments in both directions on that. So that's really what I'm trying to highlight here today. And you see some of the other examples on the screen too. It's not the goal for me today to try to definitively answer this question, though. It's really just to point out that the overall market for behavioral data analytics goes well beyond just market research. And that's it. So let's go back to market trends and let's talk for a moment about what's driving the difference in the growth for analytics versus insights. And it's really a story of tailwinds for analytics and headwinds for insights or survey research. Tailwinds for analytics. First, there's been this massive growth in the amount of digital data. A lot of it is behavioral digital data available to creative analysts in the world. One source said that the amount of digital data is up 90,000x. I don't even know how to think about that. It's such a big number since the year 2000. So just the supply of information is grown so much and is continuing to grow at an incredible rate. So you have more fuel. Second, a lot of the behavioral data that's available for analysts, highly granular analysis are possible because the data sets tend to be quite large in many cases. The data sets also often are updated on a fairly continuous basis. And so speed of data reporting certainly is enabled or enhanced by that. And ultimately, the size of the data sets, the fact that they're real data about what real people are doing, and also the technological tools that are available to people means that there's a lot of utility in the behavioral data analytics that are operating out there in the marketplace. It can be applied to a whole bunch of different things. And then, yeah, the last point, behavioral data analytics tends to pair really well with technology and then more recently with AI. So those are some of the headwinds. Tailwinds for analytics. On the headwind side for survey research, you're all familiar with the quality concerns, bots and fraud and survey fatigue. And in some cases, the press isn't so favorable to the cause of survey research either, whether it's political polling and how that gets played up on the cable news programs or more recently on CNBC. I'm sure many of your CEOs are seeing the discussion around the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US and how they're having trouble getting enough response to their surveys, which is causing them to have to restate the numbers over and over. And all of that just plays into the mindset of decision makers at the client companies that we either work at or serve, and casts a little bit of a dark cloud over the survey research. If that's happening there, maybe my survey research is also not something I should be relying on as much as I may have in the past. That's the perception that I think we deal with. Second thing for survey research from a headwind perspective is more competition, and a lot of it coming from behavioral data analytics, which are now able to address some of the market research use cases that historically have been the domain of survey research. And it's not about wiping out survey research's use against some of those use cases. It's more of what I would call a steady chipping away or an encroachment or an erosion. And it just keeps coming like an iceberg going down the side of a big mountain. And I don't think that that's going to stop anytime soon. So that has certainly reduced at least the growth opportunity for survey research, and in some cases even caused some decline in the amount of survey research applied in certain use cases. And then lastly, synthetic data, while in one sense overall positive for survey research volume of activity, it probably isn't so positive for the revenue growth in the survey research segment, because if I need a big sample of consumers, I can maybe get 1,000 from real people and then get 9,000 from synthetic data, rather than having to get all 10,000 or maybe even 5,000 all from real people. And so there's that trade-off that many companies are increasingly making these days. We'll talk a little bit more about synthetic data again in a few minutes. So those are the headwinds for survey research and the tailwinds for analytics. Now, I'm not painting the greatest picture I know for the survey research world, but it's probably one you're already more familiar with than me. I don't think, however, that survey research goes away. I think it's just being squeezed. And so if I were still active on a full-time job basis in the survey research world, I'd be thinking about it like this, which is my best path forward would be focusing on what survey research does best today, which probably isn't the same thing as what it was best at doing 20 years ago, maybe not even a few years ago. It's changing, it's evolving, and so I need to adapt. That's what I would be thinking. And what it's still the best at is explaining why for the what, by leveraging its ability to address things that behavioral data really have a difficult time getting to, which is attitudes and motivations and perceptions. And then once I have that perspective, instead of trying to fight against behavioral data, I would look to friend behavioral data. And that would be more of a hybrid solution where you use survey data for what it's best at and combine it, if it's feasible, with behavioral data, which will do what it's best at. And by putting those two things together, we get a better answer than either one of them could provide on its own. And I think this is a real opportunity for survey research or insights, because the reality is for behavioral data analytics, it's sometimes a bit of a black box. It's much better at saying what's happening rather than why that's happening. In some cases, it can address a little bit of the causals, but not completely, certainly not most of the time. And then finally, another area where I believe survey research will remain relatively resilient is anything that involves gauging response pre-market to something that's new, a new product, a new concept, a new ad. It's still difficult in many cases to know everything you want to know about a new entry prior to market using behavioral data. Some things you can do, but I think still survey research is going to be the primary way to do that. On a slightly different angle, I would say specialize if you're in the survey research world. If you're not already a generalist, I wouldn't try to become one. I would pick a few areas and be really, really good at those areas. There's a little bit of a risk that if you pick the wrong area, you'll find yourself in the wrong spot. But I think that risk now in today's world is lower than the risk of trying to be a generalist or trying to become one. And then also, I think there's another opportunity to maybe look at some alternative business models if you're in a survey research provider company. We'll talk more about that via an example in just a moment. In fact, that's what we'll do now. We'll look at the examples. I have 5 examples for you of insights and analytics businesses that I think are doing some interesting things. And I want to be clear, these aren't advertisements or endorsements that are really just examples of areas in the market where I see some things that I find really interesting and I think have potential. In every single case of these five, there are other similar firms who are doing something very similar to what these are. So not an exclusivity thing here. The first example is what I would call an analytics pure play, and the company is called Consumer Edge. They have 100% behavioral data. None of it is proprietary to them. They get all their data from other third parties. Secondly, all of their data is what we call repurposed data. In other words, not initially collected for research, but instead repurposed for research usage. And it's stuff like credit and debit card data, receipt data, transaction data. In this company, the key skills for them to be successful are things like data integration, data science. They have to be good at a nice UX for their customers because a lot of it is self-serve. And then increasingly, AI is playing a really significant role for them in their business. They are sometimes referred to as an alternative data business. And in one sense, that means they're an alternative to the traditional point of sale or household purchase panel data. Their clients originally were Wall Street hedge funds who were seeking alpha in their investments. In other words, trying to perform better than the rest of the market. And what Consumer Edge is doing now is extending a lot of those same services to brand owners across all kinds of different product categories, some CPG, some apparel, some financial services, et cetera. And it's a really interesting business, and they're doing very, very well. Next one is an example of analytics and AI. The company here is called Generation Lab. Their service that I'm referring to, they do a bunch of things, but the service I'm talking about today is called Verb AI. This is a panel-based service. All the panelists opt in, and all they're getting from those panelists is digital behavioral data. And the way they do that is they ask the panelists to download and install a tracking app, a highly intrusive tracking app on their mobile phones. And that tracking app captures nearly all the activity on the mobile phone, app usage, streaming, purchasing, browsing, all of that. And all that data gets loaded back up into a data lake and on a near real-time basis. And then what their clients are able to do is query that database in natural language. And it's an AI chat, and they get to ask questions and get answers on a real-time basis regarding their brands or the market or influencers' role for their particular brand or product category, who's got more influence than somebody else. They can find out some about their customer profile. A really interesting business, and you can see their tagline here, actions speak loudest. But what I really like is the quote that you see in the bottom right part of the screen. It said, the person said, for decades, research has been the equivalent of a doctor asking a patient to describe their symptoms. Verb AI is an MRI machine. Pretty good quote. This is the Generation Lab executive team. And I have to admit, by the way, I cut and paste this directly from their website. So I didn't mess up the formatting. This is exactly the way it looks on their website. I don't know why, but it does. But anyway, I originally had quote marks around their executive team because, look, they're also young. But I thought, no, don't do that. That's not fair. I mean, they've stood this business up, and they're getting attention, and they're doing relatively well, I assume, in their early days. And, in some ways, this might look like, part of the future of the insights and analytics world. These are young people who are either just out of or still in university, and they're doing something that's pretty interesting. Example 3. This is an analytics and insights hybrid. I think this is what I was saying before about friending. In this case, it's an analytics and insight hybrid, both within the same company. The company's called QualSights, and their two services are USights, which is analytics, and XMOT, or exact moment of truth, is what XMOT stands for. That's much more survey-based. This is a panel-based service. All the panelists opt in, and it tracks usage behavior of CPG products on an ongoing basis by having the panelists attach a small sensor to their products, and that sensor then tracks when they use it, what time of day, how long did they use it, how frequently throughout the day did they use it. In some cases, they can also measure location within the home of the use and also how much was used for certain product categories. So all of that data gets uploaded to a database and then is available for the client companies to analyze. The XMOT surveys when somebody uses the product, on some occasions, they will get a pop-up survey via their mobile device and just ask this couple of simple questions. Hey, what's happening right now? Or why are you doing what you're doing? Or could you take a short video of your actual use of the product and upload that for us right now? So that's what the XMOT survey does. And it's those two sources of information together, the usage behavioral data and the XMOT survey data, that provides a really rich mix of information for clients to understand usage behavior in the home, which has long been a pretty difficult thing to assess. Paper diaries can only go so far after all. And clients subscribe to this service by category, and it's a syndicated service, not customized. They also do customized, but not in this particular instance. So that's that example. Number 4, this is Survey plus AI agents. And this is a partnership between two companies, Market Vision and Verve Labs, both of them based in Cincinnati, which is where I live now, once again, my hometown. And Market Vision, their role in this partnership is to curate the relevant sources for the particular client. And that might be their research history. It could also include other data sources, but it's probably mostly their research history with Market Vision, quant, qual, and could be video content as well. So they create or curate that relevant library of information, then it's there, and then clients access it through an AI chat agent that's capable with drawing from data and text and video content, and that's provided through the partnership with Verve Labs. And if you're familiar with Google's Notebook LM capability, that tool that Google has made available over the past year or so, I think there's an analogy to that tool where instead of using ChatGPT or Gemini to write a prompt and then that searches everything on the web, Notebook LM just looks at the sources that you've uploaded, much like this partnership between Market Vision and Verve Labs. And then it'll provide you with responses to your questions, or an audio overview or a video overview, or other kinds of things that you may want to be able to do with that library of information. The beauty of all of this, in my view, is that for us in the research world, this makes it a lot easier for us to leverage a history of work that we've done, not as standalone projects that some of which now might be gathering dust on the digital shelf, but now it's a library of leverageable assets, a cumulative library of leverageable assets that continue to live and breathe for us, helping us answer our questions and make better decisions. That's that example. And the last one is a survey research company. This is an alternative business model. This company is called Ampere Analysis. And the way they work is, instead of working with clients and designing projects in response to what the client specifically asked for, Ampere, they predefine their topic areas. For them, it's sports and gaming and media. And then what they do is they ask clients to subscribe to that topic, much in the same way that you or I might subscribe to a magazine. You buy a magazine subscription even before you know what the articles will be over the next 12 months, right? But you're interested in that kind of content, that topic area that magazine focuses on. Same kind of thing here. And then Ampere will issue reports on that topic on a defined schedule over the course of the next 12 months. And those reports are based on their proprietary survey research as a primary base of information. But here's something I think is important. They don't just base it on the survey research they do. I think this would be a good thing for us to follow all across the market research industry. You do your survey research, but don't constrain yourself just to that information. Use that as your primary source. But what Ampere does is say, what else do we have? Maybe we'll go license some other third-party information. Maybe we'll just source information from the public domain. Whatever can help us tell the story. And we'll bring that to bear in the reports that we're going to issue. That's their approach. That's their alternative business model. It's a subscription model. They do also offer custom research and a little bit of consulting, but that's secondary. Their primary business model is this subscription. And what I think is interesting about that is that's sort of in reverse of what the typical evolution for a survey research firm is, where most survey research firms started off custom research and they try to move up the value chain over time. So that's what I think is interesting about Ampere. So now I think it's time for us to move back to Q&A.
Great presentation. Um, During the presentation, at some point, you talked a little bit about synthetic data. And as you know, synthetic data is a really hot topic. Do you want to expand on that a little bit more?
I'll expand a little bit. I'm certainly not an expert on this, but it's an area that comes up with every company that I work with these days. And so it's something I'm forced to think a lot about. And also, I'm quite interested in it. What's interesting about sort of synthetic data is it's been around for decades, but in the last couple of years, maybe since ChatGPT launched, probably a relationship there. Suddenly, it's really, really been turbocharged. The use of it, the availability of it, and so I think that's really what the big driver is right now. There was a Qualtrics study done, I think it was last year, and the Qualtrics study found that in 2024, so it's a year ago already, nearly 70% of market research professionals said they already use synthetic data somewhat regularly in their work, which kind of surprised me that the number was that high, and I'm sure it's going to continue to grow. What they also said was that by 2027, so it's now just 2 years away, these same people thought that the majority of the data they use for their work is going to be synthetic data. Less than half will be, call it real data, which that really struck me right there. There are some trade-offs, obviously, with synthetic data, and probably a lot of you on this webinar are thinking about those trade-offs right now, and I certainly acknowledge that. But here's an analogy that I think might be helpful to sort of think through. So set aside the market research role for a second. Think of the zoom capability on your mobile phone camera. So you have an optical zoom. That's like crosstabs in the market research world, right? You can zoom in on a certain set of data. Then the sort of a higher level of zoom is digital zoom. You can go beyond the optical zoom capability, and the lens does that by extrapolating some pixels. And yeah, you get a little bit better zoom capability. You can go out a little further, but pictures tend to be a little blurry, not quite as sharp as you would prefer. What's new now in the last year or two? Like for instance, on the Google Pixel 10, they have something called ProRes AI Enhanced Digital Zoom. So here it's not about extrapolating to fill in for the mixing pixels. It's about simulating what those missing pixels would look like if you were closer to the object that you're photographing. And the result is a much sharper, much clearer picture than was ever possible before this AI enhanced capability. And I think that is the analogy that we're now seeing with synthetic data. Why its use is growing so much faster now. It's because the turbocharge from AI. And I think we're going to continue to see it grow.
Mitch, you're on the board of 4 insights and analytics firms right now. Two of those I think we'd classify as more traditional market research, and 2 are more tech and analytics focused. Was that mix intentional?
Yeah, it was. It was kind of intentional. I mean, I spent my whole career, almost my whole career, in the traditional market research world, and I love it. And I think I have a lot of experience that can still be really helpful and useful to those kinds of firms. And so I definitely wanted to work with at least 1 or 2 of firms, and right now I'm working with 2 that I think fall within that segment of the overall marketplace. But I'm also equally interested in something closer to the cutting edge, and what are some of the newer things out there, things that go beyond my career experience, where I would have to really be a fast learner to be able to be of help to these businesses that I work with. And so that's why I wanted some of those, and I'm working with 2 firms that fit that segment definition as well. And I really enjoy the mix. And sometimes I'm able to bring perspectives across those businesses, traditional to the digital, or digital to the traditional market research firms. And it's a lot of fun. I really, really enjoy it a lot.
I'm going to bring in my colleague Sarah Faulkner and let her share some of the questions that are coming in from the audience.
Guys. Hi, Mitch. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and your wealth of experience here. I want to dive in a little bit more on kind of how you think about careers changing, what people are actually doing who work in this space, You mentioned early in your presentation that you would suggest that people not pursue a generalist path. And I'm curious how you think about, with the rise of large language models and all of the things that AI is starting to enable in terms of taking tasks off our plate and letting us focus on higher value. How do you think about, this is kind of a multi-part question, but how do you think about, how jobs and insights are changing? If we're not generalists, what should we be thinking about as folks are entering the industry, looking to make a change, looking to hone their skills?
Well, yeah, and just to comment on the generalist versus specialist idea, I might be wrong. So who knows if I'm right, but it's just really about either way is a risk. And I used to prefer the generalist model because when one area was hot, you could focus on that. And then when that cooled down and another area was hot, it was easy to shift across. And so I think that had advantages in the past. I just think now the the way the market is evolving, it's better to really be known for something, to be really good at it in order to be able to stand out and stand apart. That's still a risk if you pick the wrong thing, but I think now that risk is smaller than the generalist risk, where a lot of the changes in the marketplace, I think, are making it more difficult for the generalist model. So if you're not already one, like you might say Ipsos is the big generalist out there, well, yeah, they have a nice installed base of customers and a brand, a reputation. But if I were starting out right now, I wouldn't try to go that direction. The idea of what to choose, if you're it depends on where you're starting. If you're already more in the insights world, I think that hybrid idea, or focusing on the things that survey research still remains dominant, best at, I would just put my focus on those things and be as good at them as I possibly can. But I really like the hybrid idea. It's like I the some of the best examples of what are called behavioral data analytics out there, once you start to dig into the details of them, like for instance, Amazon on personalization, they base a lot of their personalization analytics on your purchase behavior, your browsing behavior, but they also base it on reviews, and they base it on the some surveys that they conduct with their customers. So they're taking a hybrid model. You find that Adidas and Vuari and a whole host of other retailers, they're doing exactly the same thing. So in almost all these so-called behavioral data analytics examples that are available out there, if you do a search on them, you find that there's often a hybrid model in play there. That still survey research is still playing a really important role. So it takes me to one of my favorite sayings in life, which is, when you have a choice, take both. Take both. Find a way to bring the survey data doing what it does best with the more, faster growing, closer to the cutting edge behavioral data analytics, and figure out how to put those two things together to do something that's better than only one or the other could do on its own.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. If you're given I've heard it also, given a choice between A or B, look for option C.
Yeah.
So kind of in the same vein of, career and how jobs are evolving, if you had a mentee come to you and say, what skills should I focus on developing in this new shifting insights landscape, to be ready for what's happening now and what's coming next?
Mm. Adaptability. I talked to a few people in prep for this webinar, and one of the recurring themes that came up when I asked people this similar kind of question, hey, if somebody asked for advice, what would you say? And the word adaptability came out of almost every single person's mouth. But why is that? Would that have always been the case? I don't think so. I think what it is a recognition of something that I believe is true, which is, look, the market has always been changing, but it's happening at a higher rate right now. And uncertainty is a little higher right now, maybe more than a little. And so one of the most important skills is, if you don't know where things are going to end up, then build adaptability so that you can flex, as things evolve. if you're not able to predict what the future is going to look like, then build adaptability. I think that is really a crucial skill. And some people are just inherently more adaptable. I mean, not everybody loves change. I get that. You know, one of the funny quotes about leadership is a big part of leadership is disappointing people at a rate they can tolerate, right? You know, uh, because yeah, it's sort of more than one of the core ideas of leadership is you're driving change, and not everybody loves change. So you don't want to go too fast. But some people are more open to change and others aren't. You got to know who you are, first of all. There may be something that you can do to make yourself a bit more open to it in the near term, which will prepare you more for the change once it comes. But the biggest thing of all, if you're not great at change and not willing to change, feel free to make that choice. Just don't be surprised when the change happens to you anyway. And so, prepare your options maybe in a different direction if that's the kind of person you are. So take a hard look in the mirror and be honest with yourself and get ready, for what will happen next, because surely something's going to happen. What was it that just AI alone says a lot of change is going to happen. I know this isn't a question about AI or a discussion about AI, but within the past month, I think it was Doug McMillon at Walmart that said AI will change literally every job in our company. And and I know Doug McMillon a little bit, and he's not a guy who's prone to hyperbole. So, you gotta take notice of that comment. And similarly, Accenture, you're doing almost $1 billion of restructuring all around what they believe AI will do to the kind of work that they provide to their clients in the future. So, plenty of examples. And that's not the only thing
P&G as
driving the
well.
change. Yeah, yeah. So adaptability is key. Let me just add one more thing to your question, because maybe it's a little more tangible. Adaptability, it's sort of abstract. There are two people I would encourage you all to consider following. One is a guy named Rashad Tabakawala. It's spelled exactly how it sounds. Rashad Tabakawala. And you can follow him on Substack, and you can follow him on LinkedIn, either one or both. His Substack is called, get the title of his Substack. It's called "The Future Does Not Fit in the Containers of the Past." That's literally the title of his Substack. But he's a blue flame thinker. He used to be the head of strategy at Publicis. He's a great guy. He says a lot of things that I don't agree with, to be clear. I think he says a lot of things that he doesn't even agree with, but he's very provocative. He talks a lot about the future of work, which does get back to your question. And he's just incredible. He's an incredible resource. He's written a couple of books, but mostly I would say follow his Substack. He posts every Sunday, and I think you'll find it well worth it. The other one is Pete Blackshaw. He's a former Procter guy, and he then founded a social listening company. Nielsen bought it. He worked at Nielsen a while. He was at Nestle a while. He now more recently has founded his next company called Brand Rank AI. You can take a look at that company, but I'm really saying follow his Substack called The Answer Economy. You can follow him on LinkedIn as well. A lot of the same content you'll see there. And he's just a really clear, great thinker about what AI is going to do to the future of marketing. And of course, whatever it does to marketing will impact insights and analytics as well. And so those are two really practical suggestions for people to consider. I think you can get some fantastic direction from them both.
Okay, that's great. It's always nice to walk away with a clear thing that you can do to keep learning. I think probably time for one last question here, and it follows on very nicely from what you were just talking about the future. So the question is, what's your point of view on changing roles, the changing role that insights teams play in futures thinking? And the person who posed this question, thanks AJ, said in his opinion that's reduced in the last few years. So if you have any thoughts on that, and any interesting companies that you would suggest that we look at in kind of the futures space, scenario thinking, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess I don't quite have enough context to know for sure if I'm understanding where the question's coming from, or where the source of the question would like me to go with this answer. So I'll just take a shot, and then if whoever asked the question, feel free to follow up, and I'll try again. Maybe I'll do better the second time. I think On the futures front, some of the things that I found intriguing are some of the white space tools that are out there these days. A lot of that is actually behavioral data analytics driven, AI enhanced capability, looking at multiple different kinds of data sets, social listening, reviews, purchasing data, marketplace trends, even text-based information that's in written form from future-oriented thinkers, all pulled together. And then they're trying to say, look here, in this market category, there's a segment that is where the market seems to be moving, and there's not many offerings in this particular segment right now. I think some of those are interesting. I know of one company, it's very small, called Simporter, that does that, but I know that there's a number of others as well. If the question is more about how can insights and analytics people play a more impactful role in the futures activity inside of their client companies, I think it's finding the things that the rest of the members of the team aren't going to be able to find on their own. You got to go find something that gives you an edge, something that creates a different perspective, adds value to the work that they're doing, and being willing to be a little bit controversial, perhaps, about it, or at least be out in front of them on it. And when that happens, guess what? There's always a chair free for you at the table.
Absolutely. All right. That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Mish. I really appreciate it. And turn it back over to Jeff. And Jeff, you need to unmute.
You get almost everything right, and then you forget. So thank you, Mitch. That was just wonderful. You really over-delivered on our hopes and expectations to be a tremendously insightful speaker. Certainly, your comments about the challenges and the changes in the industry are very resonant. Recommendations to focus even more on the whys, and I would add on the strategies and implications of the data, I think, are really important. Hybrid methods. And I live every day in the pre-market learning world, so I definitely have sympathy for that. Um, Examples you shared are very fascinating. It is amazing the diversity of companies in this industry has just mushroomed, 1,000-fold versus 10 and 20 years ago. So we really appreciate your contributions. If anybody has a question that didn't get answered, you can type it in the chat now, quickly. And Mitch will try to get back to you when he gets in a chance in the next few weeks or next few days, depends on how many come in and when. Also, a final reminder about our call for presenters for people who have growth stories to share, essentially the opportunity to share about how insights drove growth. You can see how to answer the call for presenters on the P&G Alumni LinkedIn group page. Those submissions are due in the next week, by a week from today. We are always open to event suggestions, as well as feedback. So also please drop that in the chat. And now I'm going to drop the links in the chat to join our Zoom meeting. The second you click one of those, you're going to exit this webinar system and end up in the Zoom meeting. So if you do have time to chat, to network, to say hello, please go ahead and click those. I'll stay in here for a few minutes just to make sure if you have to come back here to get it, it might make sense to copy it and put it in a Word doc or whatever before you click. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you in the chat if you can make it, or see you at the next webinar, and have a good day. And Mitch and panel, you guys are free to go ahead and click through now as well.
Okay, thanks for having me there, buddy.
Thanks. Bye-bye.